Hi, welcome, welcome back, and thank you for continuing on this journey. As the weeks go by, the world continues to shift under our feet. Every step forward in terms of the pandemic seems to be inevitably followed by two steps back. We know there is a vaccine. Some of us have received it. We dearly want an appointment to receive it if we haven't. And because of the uncertainty of supplies, we seek to put our name on any site that might come through. And the reality of living in a divided country, we are discovering, cannot be voted or wished away. With the arrival of February 1st, I know that I have become quite aware that we are just weeks away from the milestone of a year since we started distancing, sheltering, masking, isolating, and worrying big time, most of the time, all the time, too much of the time. Given the maelstrom of our world, I thought I would return to Torah this week for some wisdom and perspective. The portion of this last Shabbat was Bishalach from the book of Exodus. It comprises chapters 13 to 17. It is a very full portion whose climax is the crossing of the Reed, or more universally known as the Red Sea, as the Israelites flee from Egypt and then from Pharaoh's pursuing army. They sing joyously upon safely crossing into freedom, the realization of a miracle they never expected to witness. They begin the long journey through the desert with its attendant fears, anxieties, and constant complaining on the part of the Israelites. They are particularly fearful that they will have nothing to eat or drink and attack Moses for bringing them into the desert to die. They say, "You have brought us out into this wilderness to starve this whole congregation to death." In fairly short order, God provides manna for the Israelites to eat and to sustain them. I heard a helpful teaching this week about the manna that I think speaks to us in our unique situation at this time. The observation was made that the manna becomes a fact of the Israelites' life in the desert. They have no control over it. They may collect just enough to satisfy them for exactly one day. And then they must collect it again the next day and the next. It's only on Fridays that they are allowed to collect 2 portions so that they don't have to collect it on Shabbat. If they take too much, it rots. If they do not take enough for the day, they will have to go hungry until the next day. They have no choice, and they have no agency over what they eat. It just is. The point of the teaching was that we all find ourselves in similar situations at various times in our lives. We are in a situation where there are circumstances that just are. They are not good or bad. The situation has no quality attached to it. It just is. Whether or not we have feelings about it, there is nothing we can do about it. The question becomes, if, like the Israelites, we might tend to complain about a situation that is so static, so personal in terms of our well-being, and yet completely independent from us, can we cultivate a mindful acceptance of the situation that allows us to live with it and not fight with it, to accept our reality just as it is, without trying to change it, adjust it, transform it, or eliminate it? If we could be at ease with the circumstances over which we have no control, even for the brief period of meditating, that would be another way of living in the present, in this moment as it is, fully, completely, without thinking about tomorrow or yesterday, just living today as it is, as it can only be lived right now. So, using this idea, Let us spend a few minutes thinking about a situation in our lives that we would like to change, but cannot. Let's take our meditative positions. We will come back to some more thoughts after a brief period of breathing. Feet firmly planted on the ground, with our bodies at ease but attentive. We may put our hands in our laps, and we may close our eyes or gaze in an unfocused way at some point in front of us. And let us take that full, deep, wonderful breath, remembering that it may induce yawning. Everyone is known to fall asleep during meditation. It's kind of part of the picture, even though we try not to. Let us breathe in. Let us feel that breath go down to the bottom of our torso, certainly. And if we can manage it, all the way to the tips of our toes. At least the sense that we are breathing that deeply and that fully. And then let us breathe out with an equal sense of arrival, of relief, of release, of this is the moment. And after we've taken a few of those good, deep, new breaths that we possibly haven't done since we were together last week, let us breathe in this moment, this sitting here together, this, if it's Monday, it is February 1st. If it's later in the week, it is whatever day it is. It's the only day we have. We cannot bring back any days that have left, that have passed. We cannot live in any day to come. It's not possible. So let us breathe in acceptance and breathe out the holding on. Let us breathe in a certain ease. And breathe out as much of that bodily tension as we can. Let us breathe in acknowledgement of this finite moment, but this moment in which we are breathing in and out. And let us breathe out our insides that tense up, that fight, that constrict us, that enslave us truly to an anxiety. That harms us, harms our effectiveness, maybe even harms our well-being. We breathe in acceptance of where we are, how we are, what the circumstances are of this moment. And we breathe out tension over trying to make it different. There is a corollary to this idea that I also learned in a teaching this week. We have spoken almost every week about the anxiety and worry that plague our spirits. And we have spoken about letting go, releasing the tension we hold in our bodies is what we were just doing. What I did not connect and learned really this week is that when we disagree with something in our lives, when we don't want it or anticipate its unwelcome arrival or resist in some way, our bodies take on the fight in which our minds are engaged. In other words, it may not be generalized anxiety to which our bodies are reacting. It may be very specific thoughts, decisions, interactions that we don't want to face. And therefore, our bodies are tensing to push away the unwanted event. It's a different way of looking at that tied up in knots feeling that we so often have, that we so often carry with us. So our goal is to release our bodies from the grip of our mind's conflicts. Let us breathe in, release from our difficulties, and let us understand our bodies holding on will not solve any problem. Our bodies fighting against a possibility will not make that possibility any easier to resolve. For this moment, let us be present and not considering what is awaiting us or what decisions might need to be made or what situation we just don't want to face. Let us breathe in a different approach and let us breathe out a letting go. Let us let go of the conflict playing out in our stomachs, in the pits of our stomachs, in our necks, possibly in our chests. Maybe even our hands, our arms. Let us breathe it all out as we let it go. If we must live with the dilemmas, let us try to consider them in our minds and leave them out of our bodies. That kind of release might even help our minds determine how to proceed with greater ease. With less burden. Perhaps even with a sense of freedom that we have the capacity, the ability to make decisions about problematic situations. But the holding on, the tensing, the conflict doesn't help us. It doesn't help us. For these few moments, Let us breathe in a freedom and exhale that oppressiveness. There is one more teaching that I would share with you. As the crossing of the Red Sea, the crossing from slavery to freedom, is such a powerful image in our tradition and in our secular culture. For this teaching, I will rely on Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt's words, as I have many times in the past. She tends to speak to the issues I want to address. One of the phrases found in the Song of the Sea, the song that the Israelites sing in jubilation upon their successful crossing to freedom, is Oziv Zimratiyah, Vayehi li Lishua, which Rabbi Barenblatt, looking carefully at the Hebrew, translates as my strength, Ozi, my strength, balanced with God's song, Zimrat Yah, will be my salvation, Vayihili Lishua. Before proceeding, the other thing that is helpful to know is that the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, means literally the narrow straits or the narrow place. Thus, Egypt, a place of constriction and dehumanization, is a narrow place. The condition of slavery, the oppression of humanity, is a very narrow place of existence. Rabbi Barenblatt writes, you all probably know by now that I don't understand this as a historical story. This is a true story in the way that great literature is true. This is a true story because it speaks to one of our deepest human hopes, that when we are in tight places, we will find a way out. That when we are trapped between an advancing army and the sea, we will find a way through. That if we step into the sea, if we cultivate faith in a better future, we can partner with something beyond ourselves to bring that better future into being. We partner with something beyond ourselves, my strength, balanced with God's song. We need our own strength in order to cross the sea, to face whatever difficulties arise in our lives, and every life holds suris, suffering, which comes from the same root as Mitzrayim, the narrow place. Suris, Mitzrayim. Tsurit is the Hebrew, actually, and it's in its Ashkenazic form and its kind of Yiddish-sized form, it becomes suris. Every life has times when we feel trapped in the narrowness of our own circumstance. Life's challenges call forth our strength. Our task is to feel our own strength flowing through us and to know that we have the inner resources the moment demands. And we need God's song in order to cross the sea. We need music that uplifts the heart. We need love to sing its melody in us. We need hope and heart opening and joy. If we try to cross the sea without those things, we might manage to walk across the sand, but we'd be like the figures in the Midrash who were so busy kvetching about the muddy sea floor looking down that they forgot to notice the miracle all around them. And as a result, when they reached the other side, they weren't really free. My strength, balanced with God's song, that's what gets us across the sea. That's what gets us from the narrow place into expansiveness, where we want to live. That's what enables us to experience spiritual growth and transformation. Our own core strength, balanced with the ineffable, with song and joy. with meaning and love. Let us breathe in that expansiveness. That sense of a presence beyond us that allows us to approach the universe with an openness, with an acceptance, with a welcome that leaves constriction and narrowness behind. My strength with God's song. Something of me and something beyond me is what will get me through. As I believe the crossing of the sea is the story about crossing a threshold, I thought this reflection by the poet John O'Donohue would be an appropriate way to conclude our time together. If you go back to the etymology of the word threshold, it comes from threshing, which is to separate the grain from the husk. So the threshold, in a way, is a place where you move into more critical and challenging and worthy fullness. There are huge thresholds in every life. You know that, for instance, if you are in the middle of your life in a busy evening, 50 things to do, and you get a phone call that someone you love is suddenly dying, it takes 10 seconds to communicate that information. But when you put the phone down, you are already standing in a different world. Suddenly, everything that seemed so important before is all gone. And now you are thinking of this. So the given world that we think is there and the solid ground we are on is so tentative. And a threshold is a line which separates two territories of spirit. And very often, how we cross is the key thing. Let us ignore that. I'm so sorry. When we cross a new threshold worthily, what we do is we heal the patterns of repetition that were in us, that had us caught somewhere. I'll just repeat that very end. So the given world that we think is there and the solid ground we are on is so tentative. And a threshold is a line which separates two territories of spirit. And very often how we cross is the key thing. When we cross a new threshold worthily, what we do is we heal the patterns of repetition that were in us, that had us caught somewhere. Perhaps this week will bring a threshold, will bring us an opportunity to cross from where we are to a place we'd rather be, and will allow us to heal patterns of repetition that held us in their grip. Perhaps we will enter a place of greater expansiveness as we continue to meet the challenges of our time, of this time in our history. Don't forget to breathe. I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless.